DC news that he's going over there to run the shop. Do you ever go, look, I don't get involved in this normally, but why in the world would you do something like this? Back off, or is it the opposite? Like, go and change this shit.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, that was a total surprise to me.
Yeah,
I did not. He, like I said, he'll keep me posted on stuff, but he did not tell me that he and Peter were thinking that they even had an opportunity or were thinking of doing something like that. Like, so when I got that news at essentially the same time everyone else did, maybe like 2 weeks before they announced it, he told me. So like, that like that was very shocking.
All right. I've been talking about this all week. I'm excited for my next guest. I mean, man, whether it's from the start with Gilmore Girls, whether it is Guardians of the Galaxy, most recently, obviously, in Creature Commandos, and we're going to see him in Superman. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, the one and only Sean Gunn. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing good.
It's yeah.
Really good. I started to tell you I just watched the trailer with my wife, which is why I almost am a little teary-eyed. I got a little choked up watching.
I did too. Did you had not seen it before?
The trailer? No.
Really? So you don't like say, come on, man,
no.
Let me see it.
Well, if we were in the same city, he would have showed it to me probably, or showed me, like, it's funny because my wife Natasha, she had seen some incarnations of it.
Okay.
Or at least when they were working on it, because she was in Atlanta later than I was, so she was kind of around for stuff. And it goes that way with James and I a lot. Like if I'm around and we're in the same city, he'll show me what he's got. But he's been, like balls to the wall working for I mean, as always, kind of, but I've barely gotten to see him in the last 6 months, so I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too, because I can only imagine from when the responsibilities changed with him. That I was even talking to Frank Grillo about it when he was on, and how just locked in James is on all this stuff. And I can imagine, as his brother, you're like, it's great, but I don't get to talk to him as much as I used to.
Yeah, although he's always been a little bit of a, he's a work maniac, like he's always been sort of work first, and I am too in some ways, but not like him. So it's always been dependent on we find our times to hang out, but we also know that sometimes it's going to be a few months. Like it may be a little while, and it's never worrying, but it's sometimes it takes a while.
Right. And the beauty of it, obviously you guys get to work together a lot, and and right now with Creature Commandos, I'll tell you. All right. So the great thing about episode 4 of this, and if you haven't seen episode 4 so far, I would say come back to this part because I'm going to spoil some of it. What was done so well in this episode with both yourself and with the writing and everything in general with this character, you have this kind of wild animal who you just never know what he's going to do, and you bring this depth to him in this episode, and you really see that he first of all, that people judge him wrong, and they think that this one thing we find out he's put away for the wrong reason. He didn't kill these kids, he was actually protecting them. So what went into really good, diving deep into this kind of backstory of Weasel?
Yeah, I gotta say, I originally, when James told me about Creature Commandos and said, "Oh, Weasel's coming back and we're gonna do Weasel again," there was a part of me that was like, like I didn't get, and if you saw the Suicide Squad, yeah. Weasel is kind of played for laughs, which is fine, but it's also like sort of it's like, when I heard, hey, I'm doing this animated show, and it's like, oh, so I get to go like just grunt and whine and right. for 7 episodes and just make weird noises, and I was like not overly thrilled about it. And then we talked about G.I. Robot, and I knew I was going to do his voice too, which I was really excited about.
Yeah.
But Weasel was kind of an afterthought. I'm like, oh, I've done this, and like but reading the scripts and seeing where Weasel, what happened to Weasel, and what his backstory was really interesting. And then actually going into the booth and recording that stuff was really gratifying. It was incredibly challenging and fun. And I kind of realized that, Weasel, James always described Weasel as kind of like a big dog.
Yeah.
He's like sort of he's an animal. This is not a human. He may be human sized, right, but he's not a humanoid creature he doesn't have complicated emotions, but he does have emotions. Anybody that has a dog, that your dog gets happy or sad or depressed or, scared and all these things. And so I just knew that all of a sudden, okay, I got to tell this story using a different toolkit than you usually use as a performer. And so I still, I still have those like kind of grunts and squeals and wheezes and whatever it is Weasel does. But I had to do it to tell his emotional story.
Yeah, and there's a lot to that. There really is, because you got to feel those moments, and you do. I couldn't believe it, because so far, and I've seen about 7 or 8. I think it's the most emotional arc, I think, so far. And it's funny because even with G.I. Robot's a pretty emotional one as well, because he's got like this one purpose to just protect, kill Nazis, right? And we finally see Sergeant Rock. You know what's funny, dude, is I worked for Joe Silver back in the day, and that script, Sergeant Rock, they tried to have Shane Black do it. They tried to do all these different things with Sergeant Rock, and they wanted to get that movie going, and it just never went. And I was like, I wonder if we'll ever see Sergeant Rock when we finally see him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they're making a movie now too, right?
That's what they said. But I'm always curious, because James said that all the voices that are in, anybody who has a voice in it, if you're voicing the character, then that's who you're going to play in. That's who you could play in live action, right? Like you look at Frank Grillo, who's playing Rick Flag Sr., and then he Peacemaker and Superman, and the same thing. Well, when it comes to I think a lot of these different roles. I'm curious about Sergeant Rock, though. I wonder if the voice. There's been no talk about that.
I can't even pretend to know the answer to that.
Right.
Like it's something I would ask James, like, hey, are you gonna make this movie? And if so, how are you gonna do it? Though it was really it's been a cool experience. And my characters GI and Weasel got our episodes back to back, so it's kind of fun these last couple of weeks. But yeah, Weasel, it's like a real. It's always important for me to remind myself that that what I do professionally as a performer is unpredictable.
Yeah.
And that like we get caught up in these things of like, oh, I want this kind of role and I want the next thing to be like this, but it hits me from left field sometimes, the way I'm able to, I have the privilege really of like stepping into some of these stories and trying to tell them in a unique way. And I don't know what it's going to be before I start,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that's also, but I think that's too, knowing obviously with the relationship you have with your brother and the fact that you can play, and he does that with most of the actors that he's working with. He lets people play and he lets people like build up. He just had that quote about David Cornsweet with the tights, and that David had said one thing. He's like, well, I think this is the reason why you should have the tights, and James listened to him. So I'm sure that as a performer for yourself, to be like, look, I also, in the fact that you've known this guy all your life, you can present these things that say, hey, I want to take a shot. I want to try to do this with the character. And it probably lets you play a little bit more than with people that you don't really know as well.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of James' biggest strengths is that he manages to simultaneously be a great manager of his own vision, so that he knows kind of almost exactly what he wants,
right,
but a great collaborator at the same time. And he does listen to performers and hear performers. Is one of the reasons, people give him flack sometimes about using the same performers over and over again, but it's like he's really good at understanding what someone's skills are and then writing towards those skills. And so of course you're going to use the same. I always say to people, if you have a plumber who comes in and fixes something in your house perfectly, and then you have another problem, you're going to hire the same guy. You're not going to look for a new plumber. And like, that's kind of, I think James does that with actors a little bit.
Yeah, I think he does it very well with casting, because that's, I think for me, watching just on the outside, the things that I see his strength, the big strengths are both casting and music. Like music he uses very, very well. And I was so excited to hear these like different renditions in the Superman trailer of the classic John Williams theme. Did you know that was coming?
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Awesome,
yeah,
that's awesome.
But yeah, it's rad. It sounds great, right? It's like, oh God, I mean, and that idea, you create this texture, this tapestry of it's new for some viewers, but then some of us remember the original. I think I was 4 years old when the first Superman came out, so it's like in the recesses of my consciousness.
Yeah, and so well, it's funny, but I don't know how. Are you pretty active on social media? Because not really, right? I try to stay away from it.
I used to be, and now I try to, like, if I feel positive about something, I try to put it on Instagram and try to say, hey, check this thing out. If it's something that I really want fans to know is out there, but I don't care about it the way that I think a lot of us did 5 years ago.
I think mentally you're probably better off for it, because it's the same thing. It's
Agreed.
like, it's like I like to. For me, I do the same thing that you just said. I post and run is what I say. I post my thing and say, check this out, because even when the one thing I did wind up posting for it, I was so excited about the music coming back, and I always thought that. For me, I never understood it, because you see people, and some people are bitching about it online. They were talking about how, I can't use an original theme, and I go, James Bond had the same theme since Sean Connery. It's like it's his theme, and it's like, and I know Hans Zimmer changed it up and did his thing. I get it, and I like the theme a lot, but the thing with me was that John Williams theme just was that beacon of hope that you guys are going for in this movie, and I think it just worked. But I wanted to talk to you about your character as much as you can tell me, because we saw an iteration of the character in the last Wonder Woman movie. So with Maxwell, what is the difference, Maxwell Lord? What is the difference with the character this time around than what we saw in the Patty Jenkins movie?
Well, okay. What I can tell you is, I know there's a lot of stuff I'm supposed to sort of, like, I can't talk a lot, too much.
Okay.
But, I can tell you that the one obvious thing is that it's me playing the role, which doesn't just mean that I'm going to give a different interpretation. It's like your own body is the vessel for what you're doing. So obviously, I'm going to do, like, nobody's going to confuse me and Pedro Pascal as performers. So we're obviously going to do something like super different. I think that James is good about directing me towards the relevant source material, and so I think that the whole concept of the character takes a different type of tack than that does. I saw that movie, and obviously Pedro's a great actor, but what he does in that movie, it was not really relevant to anything that I'm doing.
Okay. And then, so were you you're the youngest, 6 kids?
Yeah, youngest of 6.
Wow. So that's
in less than 8 years, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
James is the oldest, and he's
7.5
years older than I am.
So tell me a little bit about that, though. So you're growing up in a house with 6 kids within 8 years, and it's like, and so James is the oldest, and he's doing his thing. So, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the only actor out of the group.
Professionally, yes. But
okay.
When I was growing up, everybody did it. Like my older siblings all did plays in high school. Everybody had a little bit of an artistic bent to what they were doing.
Okay. Was it so when you're growing up and you're the youngest, are you looking at your older siblings and you're going, oh, I want to do that, I want to do what they're doing? Or is it like, no, you know what, I kind of caught the bug, so I'm going to do my own thing? Like what's the dynamic of the Gunn kids growing up?
Yeah, for me, I was definitely the one who was always just like, I am an actor. That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
And you can see when I was, when I was 6 years old, people asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I would say, I'm going to be an actor.
Right.
And my mom, I saw my mom last weekend, and she was like, yeah, I think it was actually even earlier than that, though, that you were like showing that you wanted. She's like, I remember when you were 2 years old, you would get the cylinder block and you would stand up on the hearth and act like you were performing in front of people. Like that was what I did. So for me, it was always about being a performer. But I never felt like I was following the footsteps of my siblings, but I did from a sense of like taste and what we valued and all those. Like I wanted their approval. I wanted them to think that I was cool, and I wanted, so from a standpoint of like listening to the music that they listened to and liking the same movies that they liked, and just sort of, getting this identity of who I am, which when you then go into the arts, like that alchemy becomes part of who you are as an artist. So I do think that, like, even though I don't feel like I was following in their footsteps, but I do feel like there's some little part of all my siblings in my makeup as a person. And
sure, yeah, you pick things up along the way, and certain things that you see, like you said, with the movies.
Yeah.
Did you pick up the love for comic books during that time too, or not as much?
No, not as much.
Okay.
Not as much. It's funny. Because I go do Comic Cons all the time, now. I'm like, I've been on the circuit for a while, and I go and I meet so many fans, and there's a lot of people who just jump into going deep into comic books, and I'm like, I bet on sports, like I'm like,
right. Who's your team?
Let's talk about the NBA.
Yeah, who's your team?
Clippers in the NBA.
Clippers.
Big time.
Okay.
Rams in the NFL.
Oh wow, okay. So you totally went over to the LA side.
Cardinals though.
Okay. Cardinals and baseball. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But I love sports. I particularly love basketball. I like it's a big thing, and it's like it's like it was never James's thing.
Yeah.
I would get glimpses of what he liked, and so I would pick things up. I would literally see comic books on his room, and I would pick them up, and I'd flip through them, but I would never really read them.
Right. They didn't hook you the same way.
Yeah. So I knew who they all were, but I didn't get there the way he did.
You're welcome. Yep, I gave you the gift of Via. That's right. And I'm going to give it to you again. If you want to break from the crowded stores and the endless gift lists, you restore your zen and you embrace the natural power of cannabis this holiday season with Via. This holiday season, you got to unwind, you recharge with Via. Whether you're enjoying a quiet evening at home or embracing the festive cheer, Via's premium THC and THC-free gummies will help you find your perfect holiday balance. Via is well renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies, and they legally ship to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee. There's no medical card required. Right now, Via is having a huge holiday sale. For a limited time, you can save up to 25% off of site-wide, plus up to 50% off select items and bundles. So if you are 21 and up, check out our link to Via's website in the description. I absolutely love Via. There's so many different things. It does feel like Christmas when you get it. Anyway, my favorite one is the sleep one. I really dig it. It's wonderful. Really nice dreams. Use that code Kristian for 25% off. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. You got to support our show, and you tell them that we sent you this holiday season. Enhance your everyday with Via. You're welcome. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. I've talked about BetterHelp. I've told you guys about BetterHelp for at least got to be 2 years now. Roxy talks about it all of the time. And if you want to stay cozy during the winter, whether it's bundling yourself up, being with loved ones, I'll tell you, a great way to bring some comfort into your life is therapy. It just never goes away, even when the season changes. Now, as I mentioned to you, I've got family members who have been with BetterHelp. Roxy talks about it all the time, and the benefits Roxy has had from BetterHelp has just been tremendous. I just remember that day when I recommended to her, and she was in not a great place. And now she talks about it all the time, and it's convenient because if you're thinking about therapy, you should give BetterHelp a try because it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It's suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. And you switch therapists anytime, no additional charge. So find comfort this December with BetterHelp. You got to visit betterhelp.com/bigthing and get 10% off your first month. BetterHelp, HELP.com/bigthing. It's also, you just said earlier, where you said that when you're doing these roles, he right away, he's going to be able to direct you to say, oh, okay, that's where I need to do my research as an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that so? Tell me a little bit about what then with Kraglin, then when you guys decide you're going to do Guardians and you come in to do this role, and that role just evolves throughout each movie and even into Thor and to the Christmas special. So how does that whole thing come about?
It's crazy that role expanded the way it did. I knew when James got the job that he was going to write and direct Guardians, which was just like such a massive life change for him. It was a downtime. It had been a downtime for both of us professionally. I'd done Gilmore Girls, but I'd kind of had some really lean years, and I was like, look, I was not working enough and things like that, and so I knew that we always would try to work together when we could, but also it was a big new job for him. It was big. The idea that like he should just be expected to hire me for something was not there. Like I knew that like, hey, if he can, he will. That's always been our thing. If it's right, we'll do it, but we're not going to like shoehorn something into the wrong.
I got you a good Christmas gift last year. Come on.
Yeah, right. But he kind of told me when he first talked about Guardians, he talked about Rocket, and he talked about how they hadn't cast a voice actor yet, that they were going to go with a bigger celebrity, but he wasn't even sure they would have somebody cast by the time they started shooting, and that he needed somebody on set to play Rocket. That he trusted, that he could that would be something other than just a PA holding the script, etc. Things. And that maybe he would ask me to do it, but he wasn't sure. There were a lot of things. And he said at the same time, I do think I have a role for you also, a character that he called the first mate.
Okay.
Who's like, he's like the first mate of the character that Rooker's playing.
Yeah.
I knew Rooker, we'd worked together and we were friends by that point. I was like, cool. And first of all, I was really excited for him, but I also just really needed a job. And so I was like, great, hopefully this will work out. I have no idea. And then it all came together really, really fast. I think after he was in prep for a while, he's like, okay, it's going to be two things. I'm going to ask you to come to London and read this character of Rocket, at least like read him in the read through, and we're going to figure out how this character is going to work. But then also while you're here, there'll be this on-screen character that I didn't know much about. I read the script, and like we like Kraglin evolved. So we experimented with who that character was. I know that I showed up and it was like, he's Texture in the first movie. He's a sidekick. And I mean, he remains a sidekick for part of it, but like he's like kind of chimes in from the background and has a line here, a line there. And it was like, who is this guy? Is he a bad guy? I had no idea. I was like, is he like a maniac? Are we playing him for laughs? What are we doing? And we experimented. We did it. We shot it different ways on set. And we like kind of tried different things. And it wasn't really till I saw a cut of the movie that I understood much better who the character was, which is like, that was a new experience for me as an actor. I never I went to an acting conservatory. I've been like acting my whole life. So the idea that I would do anything other than try to create a complete performance and then deliver it was different to me. But I really felt like we kind of learned who Kraglin was, and then James got sort of an expanded vision of who that character could be. And before the second movie, he's like, I want to do a little more with Kraglin, and I think he started to have a vision. I think James always had pieces of the trilogy in mind, but then after he finished the first movie and saw what worked, he got a real vision for both the second and the third movies kind of at the same time.
Yeah, it reminded me the evolution of what Kraglin's character was. Reminded me very wrestling. It reminded me of the old school kind of heel turning into a baby face. By the end of it, you're like, oh yeah, that guy. I would buy his merch. But you know, tell me a little bit about though with Guardians, where that starts out, that movie, because that hits at 2014 when Marvel's just hitting home runs left and right, but they were doing it on the Captain America's, Iron Man, and so here comes this movie that no one knows what the hell is a Guardian of the Galaxy. What no one knows what that is, and so is there in your head, in his head, are you guys going, fingers crossed, let's see what happens, and then whatever that feeling is, then leading up to seeing that opening weekend, go, okay, we got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always I always like to point out that like the level of risk was a million times more for James,
right?
You know, and Chris Pratt too.
Yeah.
Than it was for me. You know, if that movie bombs, you know, I walk away from it and I go do my next thing. But James isn't going to get another chance anytime soon to direct a big budget movie, or maybe even any movie,
right?
You know, and it's kind of the same thing with Chris and the lead, like carrying a movie. It was like, so I think those guys were a lot more nervous about it being a bomb. But I also, like, I knew the movie was going to be pretty good, at least. Like, my floor was, this movie's going to be good. I knew my brother. I knew his work. He has since said later that there were times when he felt like he was designed in a lab to direct that movie franchise, you know, that it was like, it really was the perfect job for him. I think it was the perfect job for James. And I think James was the perfect hire for Marvel for exactly what you're talking about. Like, they needed somebody to take these characters that people didn't know and make them as lovable and as much at the forefront as all the characters people did know. And that's like, nobody, like James is good at that as anybody has ever been.
Yeah.
And like taking these characters and really making it. So I knew the movie was going to be good. I had no idea if it was going to really find its audience. I didn't think it was going to bomb, but I was also like, look, at the very least, people are going to like this movie. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be a cult hit, maybe, you know, at its floor. Like, people will think it's funny and cool, but is it going to be a hit the way the other Marvel movies are? I have no idea, but it's also kind of out of my hands. And so I just was like, after it was shot, I mostly just became a spectator. I became a fan, and like I would watch stuff that James would show me, and and I was just like, you kind of just get on the roller coaster and see what happens.
Yeah, and it's funny because like to be completely upfront, on the first one, I loved it. The second one, the first time I saw it, I was like, I was overwhelmed by the humor. I thought it was all funny. but I was like, everybody had a joke, and I was like, I don't know if it's hitting from the same way. It was the rewatch, when I did a rewatch, that I was like, oh, the emotion when you really tap into the Yondu stuff and the Rocket stuff, and you see, and it was after I saw Guardians 3 that I went back to revisit it, and it's like, oh, it really ties into what happens to Rocket. And because the third movie is my favorite out of the three. Like,
mine too.
It's so good, and it's, as an animal lover, like everything, it's like, it's just such an emotional ride and a great ending to it. But I want to shift into the DC thing, but before I do with that, I want to get your thoughts on the third one, because you just said it was your favorite also.
Yeah.
What was it about that movie that you're like, oh, this is the special one?
Well, it's a few different things. Like, for me, it's half of it is always personal. So it's like, when I'm watching the movie, I'm watching it as a fan, but I'm also reliving my experiences making it and knowing what it was like to, like, kind of complete that trilogy. And I was a little worried when we showed up to start making the third movie. Like, you never know. I love all the people involved, but it's like, is anyone going to be phoning it in maybe in a way they weren't? Is there going to be this same enthusiasm to make something special? as there was at the beginning. And what I found was that there was more enthusiasm, that the people who were part of it were really part of it, and that they were there because they wanted to like kind of really complete this circle and make something great. So also my character got bigger. I became a member of the family in the way that I wasn't in the first movie. Maybe I was as a performer, but I wasn't on screen, a member of the family. Anyway, and so like that part of it is really special. But the movie itself, which I think is what you're asking about, I just think it's really cool how you kind of complete this thing where the first movie starts out as Quill's story.
Yep.
It seems like it's Quill's journey, but by the end of the third movie, you kind of realize that it's really been Rocket's journey that we've been watching all along. I mean, that's when Lila hugs him and says this. She says exactly that. It's been your story all along, and the idea that this little creature that was so full of self-loathing and loathing for the world, when we first meet Rocket, he's like pointing a fake gun at people's heads and pretending to kill them, right?
Stealing arms and doing all that.
And by the third movie, him kind of taking the reins, and that we learn that there's this trauma behind that, and there's just like a whole beautiful arc for that character that I just think really, really works. Like it really is. It's very moving to me. I love it.
Yeah, same. That one. That one blew me away when I saw it, because like I said, I really enjoyed the first one, and I found a love for the second one, but the third one really, really was special to me. But
great villain, dude. Chuck's a great villain. You need a great villain.
Yeah.
And it really just, and I think all the acting is a little bit like all the acting is a little better. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, well, it's because it's like being on a TV show for a bit. Also, the character so well. Like you said, from what you saw, you didn't really, from the first movie, you don't even really necessarily know what your character is. You have to watch footage. By the third one, and the Avengers movies and everything else too, you know who this character is. So you're like, you just switch on. So that makes total sense.
Yeah.
But I want to and talk about this as much as you want to. You can also tell me to move on from it, because I just want to get into the path of getting to DC, because there is that point where it doesn't look like James is even going to do the third movie, and it looks like a lot of you guys are like, well, F it, I'm not going to do the third movie either during all that time. And then and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in between that time where he gets the Suicide Squad, right?
Yeah.
Right. So can you tell me just as much as you can, you don't have to rehash anything, but that particular time of like, okay, well now he's doing the Suicide Squad. It's like, I'm going from the Yankees to the Red Sox. Here we go. What's that time like?
Yeah. I mean, it felt like a long time in the moment, but I guess it kind of really wasn't. And it was like, the whole thing. Again, we don't have to rehash the story, although I don't think there's any embarrassing elements about it.
No, it's up to you. I just didn't, if you didn't want to talk about it. Yeah.
Right. And like he had written these tweets and he got fired for it. And it was kind of, it was like half bullshit and half understandable that he got fired. Like there's always a lot of things at play other than our emotional attachment to how we think things should go, obviously. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we're not making this third movie that we felt ready to make. And it was really devastating for me personally, but I also was more worried about my brother, who I know thought his career was over for a minute, and so he was kind of what he was going through, I know was incredibly difficult. But I also think that people in the business of making movies recognize talent, and they know how to not pass up an opportunity. And so my understanding is that Warner Brothers contacted him pretty quickly and said, we want you to come do something here. And that they may have had their ideas about, they're like, we can tell you what we'd most like you to do. And he's like, well, I'm just going to tell you what I want to do, which is I really want to make, he's like my first choice would be Suicide Squad, but I know you just made a Suicide Squad movie. So maybe you don't want me to do that. And I'm like, if you want to make another one, let's just do it. He said, that's what I want to do. And then he just kind of jumped in.
Yeah.
Like I'm not, for people who know me as a collaborator, my brother James, I'm not ever involved in any of that part of the business. You know,
right.
like I don't, he then calls me and says, hey man, I've decided what my next project is. And here it is. And, you know, I'll let you know if and when there's a part for you, or if there's something you're interested in doing, you know?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that one of the things that I noticed with all that too, and I'm sure that probably would add into the Warner Brothers saying, let's call this guy right away, is the amount of support that James got from, I remember just Batista, I remember him alone and everybody else just standing up going, this is bullshit. Like this guy, wherever he goes, I'm going to go. And I think that this shows the relationship he has with the talent, but then Warner Brothers basically going, yeah, come on over, do this movie. And then he calls you and says, yeah, let's do this. I got Weasel.
Yeah, totally. He's like, I got Weasel and Calendar Man too.
Yes, and Calendar Man.
But it was the same thing. What I was talking about earlier with Creature Commandos about how like I was like, I don't know, Weasel really, but I do want to play GI Robot, so I'll go do both. It was almost a little bit of the same thing with Suicide Squad, where I'm like, gosh, this is big, sticky, crazy character, and like, well, I got to play Calendar Man. Yeah. Also got these. He's got a fun moment, and a funny little thing, and maybe that character will show up again down the line. Who like that seems doubtful, but like it's like but like yeah, Weasel is just like I don't know, it's just weird.
Yeah.
Like I'm always first of all I'm a physically kind of strange actor. Like I'm limber and my body's shaped a little weird, and like so I'm like I'm already, and I'm also a gamer, you know, in the sense that like I don't have any shame when it comes to like I don't get embarrassed doing crazy things.
Yeah.
I see it as part of my job, that like it's always like tell the story, do it to the best of your ability. So like I'm just gonna try to do Weasel from whatever it is that I don't know. I could go on and on about stuff. I think
I love the fact that, you know, but that's great. And the fact that he tells you that, you're like, I don't want to play a big crazy animal. He's like, yeah, you do. This is why I get fun. And you're going, all right, cool. Then I can do this.
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah.
And then also my ego kicks in. And it's like, well, nobody's going to do this better than I am. So like, you know, like, I'm like, I don't know that I really want to do this, but I also don't want to watch someone else do it.
Right.
And so like, I'm like, yeah, of course I'll come.
Are you laughing your ass off when you finally see what he does with it? When you finally hits the screen, you're like, holy shit, that's exactly what I was kind of hoping it would be.
Yeah, kind of. And he includes me in a lot of that process.
Okay.
So he'll show me like before I even stepped foot on set with Weasel, I had pretty like full renderings and animatics, and I knew what he was going to look like. I knew they were, like modeling him after me in certain unflattering elements, but whatever, that's how it is. And it's like, so I feel like I have some sense of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, Suicide Squad was one because I mean, again, the first one that wasn't for me, but then the Suicide Squad was, and I remember that was like during like the COVID period, so I watched that in my old office, and there's this one particular scene when Harley Quinn's walking, and like there's like in this whole like long scene with like the flowers and all this. This is the way it's shot. It's just so beautiful. But the scene that killed me was the Peacemaker scene when they're going through and they're shooting all the dudes, and then they find out they're on the same side. I laughed for so fucking long with that thing.
It's so dark too.
It's so dark.
That scene is so dark.
It is.
And that scene played great on the page too.
Yeah.
Like I read that scene and I was like, holy smokes. Like it was just really, I love that scene too.
It's hilarious.
And that movie in some ways is as much James as anything. What I really like about Creature Commandos is that I feel like Creature Commandos has that element of really doing it, like kind of is hitting the mark of what James really likes to do, like what we saw in Suicide Squad.
Right.
But it's got a little more of the heart that Guardians has as well, and so it's kind of
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that one of the things that kind of going down that road and the transition of it. So the Suicide Squad, it ends, and like as I mentioned, it's COVID. It's a tough time to really judge to where people are going to the theaters or not, because I know that the box office wasn't exactly what everybody wanted it to be, but it was also time when it was just hard to get people in the theaters at that point. But nonetheless, he goes back, he does Guardians 3. You guys finish that up. When you find out the DC news that he's going over there to run the shop, do you ever go, look, I don't get involved in this normally, but why in the world would you do something like this? Back off, or is it the opposite? Like, go and change this shit.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, that was a total surprise to me.
Yeah.
I did not, like I said, he'll keep me posted on stuff, but he did not tell me that he and Peter were thinking that they even had an opportunity or were thinking of doing something like that. Like, so when I got that news at essentially the same time everyone else did, maybe like 2 weeks before they announced it, he told me. So like, that like that was very shocking. And I actually remember my friend, Dan Palladino, who's Amy Sherman Palladino's husband, who I worked with on Gilmore Girls, and I did this episode of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and he's been a writer and creator. He's incredibly talented, worked on Family Guy forever, and he's just like anyway, I remember talking to him, and he knows James. I was doing ADR for Mrs. Maisel when the news came out that James got that job, and he asks the exact question that you asked, which was, he's like, I get that it's an insane opportunity, but why would he want that job? Why would you, when you're on, when it can feel adversarial, the difference between creators and studio people.
Yeah.
And like, you're always constantly like, there's always a little bit of a battle. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, it almost felt like jumping ship. Like, you're going from being a creator to being, all of a sudden you have to say no to people.
You're joining the empire.
Yeah. It's like, you have to listen to pitches and say, no, that's not good enough. And you have to like all these kinds of things. And it really kind of stuck with me that, like, yeah, but I also know James well enough that I kind of got it. But I did ask James the question. I said, Dan asked this question, why would you want this job? And he's like, it's just kind of an opportunity to create this story world from the bottom up in a way that's never been done before. It's just an opportunity to like do something that no creator has ever really been given the opportunity to do. And of course, I just couldn't pass it up. And I get that. I get that James, like, building and it's like, oh, making one movie, that's awesome. But then, oh, you can make a whole franchise. Right. That's even more amazing.
Right.
And now it's like not just a whole franchise, but a whole world. You're like, he's not doing it alone. You're doing it as a manager. You're like finding the right collaborators and picking how the different pieces fit together. And I get it. And he's the right person to do it.
Seems like really... it so far. I'll tell you that. I mean, you look at what he's doing with both Creature Commandos, how he's putting together lanterns and going into the Superman trailer already. I think that everybody's going to have that question about, because James is a funny dude. He leads with humor a lot of times. Peacemaker, it works. Suicide Squad, it works. Creature Commandos. And the question is, well, I don't know if that's going to work for Superman. In the trailer, didn't see any of that yet, but it's not the movie. But still, your trailer is like, look, this is what the movie and the tone is going to be. It's hope. And you kind of get that through that. So it looks like he's making the right decisions thus far. So I get why he takes the job also. And another reason, he gave an answer. So Josh Horowitz is a buddy of mine, and he just had James on the show, and they had a conversation about it. And he said, look, the thing is, I'm not the business guy. That's not the thing that I want to do. That's what Peter's so good at it.
Yeah.
And he's like, so I'm able to do the creative stuff and continue to do the creative stuff. That's what I want to do. And then basically everything that you just said. So you guys go, you leave, the Marvel stuff is, you made your mark, you guys take off, you go to DC. Now there's a time in between that where the strikes happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you were pretty vocal on a lot of times, and so is there, because you guys go over to DC, I'm just curious if there was a line, because you were pretty vocal against Iger a lot of times, right? Is there's like, you can go after Iger, just leave Safran alone. I mean, not Safran,
Zaslav.
Thank you. I couldn't get the name out. Zaslav.
Yeah. On the advice of counsel,
just fair. Can't answer.
Not to comment at this time.
That's fair.
I was specifically, I did not single out Bob Iger. I didn't even mean to personally denigrate him. I was specifically commenting. He had just done an interview at that like billionaires thing in Aspen, where he's like, it's a shame. It's a shame that these writers and actors think that there's more money available than there used to be. And I just like really, it burned me up. I got a little angry about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what I always wanted to call attention to, and it is true of all the billionaires. It's true of all these guys who run the company. But I think it's important to remember in every field that there's a moral element to like we can't just lean on this idea that capitalism is what it is, and so if all the money flows to the top, that's just how it is, and that's a shame. Like there's a moral element to that. There's a responsibility, if you want to be a good person, to say like, no, I'm going to make my company something in which we share equitably with the people who have created the wealth together.
Right.
And so I think I did not mean to single anyone out. I was really just responding.
Just pissed off. That was a tough time.
I saw that morning, like I watched that interview that morning, and then I went to the pickup line, and I hope I'm not blacklisted by anybody,
I bet you wouldn't be, because I think that time was that was a very heated time in general for everybody. And I think it's like one of those things, it's like almost like during a political debate, people are just going back and forth saying things, and the next thing you know, they're shaking hands and they're working together. It's just like, it's how it goes down. And I understood the passion behind it for sure. I was just curious, but you go to DC then, and then it starts, and you mentioned something about Weasel. Do you at any point go, hey, you should consider Rachel for Lois?
Oh, it was a little bit the other way around. What happened was, James said he had auditioned her and said her that her audition was just obviously was spectacular.
Yeah.
And he told me that. And I was able to tell him, I worked with her very briefly and thought that not only was her work excellent, but she seemed really cool. And I hope I'm not, I don't think it's a secret that James does, like because he's talked about it. He does like very deep vetting of
he's talked about
actors because he wants to make sure they're nice people in addition to being, and that they're hardworking people in addition to being good actors. It's one of the reasons why his sets run smoothly, and why I think his jobs, his movies for the most part are really fun to work on because people are super prepared, and because people are nice to one another, and they don't tolerate some of the Hollywood bullshit you get with other people.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I said she's great, and I said I can also, I can also ask my friends who have worked with her for recommendation. What do they think? And she got the most glowing. I mean, Amy gave Rachel the most glowing recommendation you could possibly give an actor about how after doing, after years of what I'm sure was a hard shoot on Weasel, that just what a professional and what a joy of a performer she has to work with. So I passed that along to James, and he's like, I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but it's like, it's still going to be about the screen test and about the work. But he's like, that's good to know that she's also an awesome person.
It's also refreshing to know that he looks for that type of stuff on the set, right? And I can tell you that I'm at the Critics' Choice Awards. I can't remember what year it was, but I had an opportunity to meet her, and I was talking to her because I had done stand-up for a very long time. And I was talking to her about stand-up and on the side, and she was just it was like after the show, she was just so welcoming, sitting there having a whole conversation. We were talking about George Carlin because she had never seen Carlin at Carnegie. I'm like, oh, you got to watch that one. That's one you got to see. But we just had a really long conversation, and she was a sweetheart. I mean, look, it was one day as opposed to people working on it, but you can get a vibe from somebody if they're just like, oh yeah, and they're just kind of like shining you on. But you could tell that kind of warmth that was there. And to have that, plus you could see what she can do in Weasel with kind of being like Lois needs to be, and
totally.
You see that.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then Corin Sweat, who comes out of nowhere, basically. I mean, he's been in stuff, obviously, and I didn't realize he was a Juilliard guy.
Did I even know that?
Grillo told me that. Grillo told me that on when I spoke to him. I knew that because we were talking about Christopher Reeve. Yeah, and he's like, they both went to Juilliard. I was like, holy shit, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, maybe I knew that somewhere in my brain. I don't know David well. I met him a couple times. He's great. I can tell you from the footage I've seen from the movie that like I'm just absolutely I'm bowled over by his performance. I just think it's sometimes viewers don't always understand the degree of difficulty of certain performances. There's some kinds of like it always burns me up that, like, for example, comedians rarely get Oscar nominations because they're just actually what they're doing is often much harder than these dramatic roles. And I kind of think the same thing sometimes about these big movie star roles, that like they're to carry a movie and be charismatic and do all the things that a movie star needs to do is difficult, and it takes a certain type of skill. But to add on that layer of craft where you're just like elevating every little part of it in every little way you can it's a tightrope act, and it's just incredibly impressive. And I think I'm very excited for an audience to see that, because I think his performance is the type of thing that would rarely be singled out as one of the best performances of the year because of the type of movie it is. And yet I just think he's spectacular.
It's so funny you say that, because I was thinking about this the other day, where like the movies that normally get nominated for Oscars now, the ones that come out at the end of the year, they're usually dramas, biopics, and all these things. And like hardly the mainstream movies really get nominated. Some do, some don't. But I was thinking about like back in that 90, 91, there's no world that today Julia Roberts gets nominated for romantic comedy in Pretty Woman. There's no world that would happen today. It just wouldn't. So I think you make some really great points that that type of performance should be.
There's a lot of that type of thing, and I try to, as an actor, I try to be like, awards are kind of stupid. They're not really for like it's like, I get singling people out, but I also, it's like, oh, this performance is better than that one. Right. It's always a weird for me with so I try not to get too wrapped up in it, but I also want people to get their due, and I want audiences to find the stuff that they should. Anyway. Yeah,
no, I'm with you, and I think that it's like, I'm always, for me, award shows, I feel the same way. It's like it is what it is, and but if it is going to help people get jobs, and it's going to help them in their careers, and it's going to help them do things and to elevate them up there, then I understand it. I think it's a great move that they finally moved the Academy Awards to streaming. I think it's a different world now. You don't need to put it on network television, but whole other conversation. Last thing to discuss with you before I let you go here is that with Creature Commandos and where it is right now, are there things with the characters you're playing now inside of that, and then also, and I just don't know how much you can talk about it with Maxwell, where he goes, because are we going to see him past Superman? Are we going to see some of these characters? How long is Sean Gunn going to be in the DCU, I guess is the question I ask her.
Well, I think, unless Christmas Day goes really poorly at the Gunn household, I can say that my brother and I will try to work together as much as we can for as long as we can.
Yeah.
So I would like to think that like there'll be something that we can work on together. I don't know. I don't always know where that goes immediately. I have a lot of trust in my brother, and I have a lot of trust that he is good at recognizing how we might best be able to collaborate on something. But I'm also a free agent. Like it's like I know earlier, and it's like whatever. But earlier you mentioned like kind of moving on from Marvel and going away from that. It's like, I guess so. I mean, they they have my phone number. If they call me, I'm not hanging up.
So you would. So if they say that, hey, listen, we want you to return in the role, and if we have more things like, yeah, I guess that's another question. If they wanted to do Guardians 4 without James, and they're like, hey, we want Kraglin to come back for you'd be open for it.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm an actor. I'm always promoting something, but also looking for work. So like,
right, yeah. Okay. So,
I would talk about it for sure.
Okay.
It doesn't mean I'm like waiting by the phone or that I'm expecting that necessarily to happen. For the most part, I'm not expecting that to happen. But no, I never say never to anything. I want to do cool stuff, and I love doing a variety of stuff. I love like doing, I did a couple of indie movies last year that are super low budget, and I might do a couple more this year, and medium stuff. I've been looking. I would love to get back to have my faces on a regular television series again, which I haven't done in a long time. So like I love trying to do as many different types of thing that I can. I'm like a utility infielder.
Yeah. Would you want to do? Would it really? I guess the answer is probably whatever role is the best one. But I think that do you have a preference as far as like streaming network television? Like if something came along, is this something? What are some of the shows that you're like that you love right now that you're like, oh, something like that, or maybe that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I love that's on that's kind of going on right now. It's funny. I just finished Penguin, which is awesome.
Oh, so good.
That's a DC property.
Yeah.
So like it's like that, but like I like some of these. I like the comedies. I watch a show like Hacks, for example, or I always forget them in the moment, but something where you can kind of like that are grounded in reality, but you have an opportunity to show some comic chops as well. Like I feel like it's something that's sort of missing from my not just from my resume, but from my performing right now that I'm good at. That I would love to like do something that's like one of the things I like about Maxwell Lord is I've done a lot of this weird type of stuff where I'm either in makeup or I'm in green screen or I'm like doing it, and I like the idea of playing a character who's my age and looks like me and walks upright and talks in complete sentences. Like is really appealing to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. But it always, the first thing you said is the truest, which is like, it's always chase the words. So whatever the best material is always going to be the first choice.
Understood. I have to thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate it very much, and I'm really enjoying what you guys are doing right now. Creature Commandos is on right now. You can go on Max, HBO Max, and you can check that out. It's it's a fun show. As Sean mentioned, it's got a lot of heart to it, so I highly recommend it. But again, Sean, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a great chat.
Thanks, man. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you, Sean.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Be well.
Well, there you have it. Sean Gunn, everybody. That was a fun chat. He's a nice guy, man. Really nice guy. So I liked how honest he was. And I liked how he was just like, brought up anything brought up, whether it was the stuff that happened in the in-between with James and Disney, and then even talking about the stuff that when he was talking about the stuff with Iger, he's really honest. I like that. And I also like the fact that he's just talking about, you can tell the love he has for his brother too, man. You can feel that, when he's talking about him. It's his big bro. And he's talking about the stuff that he's did now. there's things he knows that he can do, and they have like these kind of these calls together, and you could also see the big brother kind of hold him back. And all right, little brother, I'll let you know when you need to know, and now you do, and I want you involved in it. I the story that was told in between that. I really enjoyed a lot. So I like what they're doing, and I also like the honesty. He was like, I don't know, he gave me Weasel. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. It's just making noises and do. And he's like, then I wound up having a lot of fun with it. I got to be me. It was a great chat. I agree with him. I really liked talking to him. I thought that he had some really great things to say. So thank you guys for joining us here today. As you saw in between the interview, please check out one of our sponsors. We got some good ones here today. And enjoy your holidays. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you later.